1, 2,
Standing
go.
by.
Everybody, you're listening to and possibly watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in or possibly stream in. It is March 13th, 2025. We weren't able to join you last week, but we're here again, and we'll get our 2 episodes in for the month. We'll definitely do that. What have you guys been up to in the last 3 weeks?
Caleb, did you want to show us what you've been up to?
Yeah.
Well, I so the biggest thing is I got some new artwork. I don't know if the folks at home can see this, but I finally pulled the trigger and got a Tom of Finland tattoo on my left forearm. If you are familiar with the Taschen collection of his Cocky comics, it's the image that's on the front cover of that with the Leather Daddy kind of perched, and so it's going to be we're going to go in and fill in the rest of it and get the forearm done by summer. But that was the biggest like artsy thing that I've done. Other than that, I've just done a little bit of traveling, got to do some work, headed up to a couple places for some trainings that I lead at work, and just been super busy. I mean, Arkansas is, for me, work-wise, we're in the middle of a legislative session. Arkansas has a weird legislature. They only meet every 2 years. And so for a little 4-month window, all of the worst things possible could happen and do. And so it's just like a whole lot of hate funneled down into one little segment. And so in my job being somewhat, government-based is very much involved with that. So, trying to help pass some bills that do some good things, trying to represent cities and towns, and then trying to, in my personal capacity, push back against just shit. I mean, there's no other way to just insanity and fascism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The news every day from certain states, including North Carolina, as well as just the fire hose of bullshit that pours out of Washington every single day. There's something new and something horrible and something terrible and something that makes you want to bang your head against the wall. But
there was that beautiful footage of J.D. Vance getting booed at the Kennedy
I
Center.
saw that earlier, and it was wonderful.
That was so beautiful.
Tear to my eye. Brought a tear to my eye.
I mean,
almost makes up for the Tesla
it was almost Dangerous Liaisons level. Almost. I mean, it seemed like if people were in the audience prepared for it, it would have gone there. And I love hearing the woman on the team like, J.D. Vance, fuck. It's so weird.
Lovely.
It's just so weird right now. Oh man.
It is. Hey, Daniel Williamson has joined us. Tom of Finland, yay! Looks great, Caleb.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I saw that. I will comment. So for some reason, when we stream on here, we can't comment through the chat on StreamYard, which is the program we use to stream, or at least I can't. But I can go on, I guess, Facebook, or maybe you logged on through YouTube or something like that, and I was going to comment to you there, but I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
I think you can through Facebook you can through Facebook, but we may not see his comment through Facebook. But if somebody commented through Facebook Live, we can see it. Yeah.
Same thing with YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see it on YouTube, and you can reply on YouTube. Fun.
Well, I had a little bit of upheaval, and a project at work that I was supposed to be on until August of 2026 came to a grinding halt, and
Saith nay.
it's a shame because I love the engagement. I really love the engagement. I know with consulting that it's like you have a new job every few months. It really is. And this was a job that I never minded signing on in the morning. God knows there've been times where I've been like, ugh, for those first few minutes. And the people I work with were all really good, and I think I am going to be working with many of these people again. It's just just need some time to regroup. But I started immediately on a new project, and it actually is not an anti-money laundering project, though we are satisfying an anti-money laundering-ish component to it. So it's actually through our government services. So that's been interesting, seeing things through slightly different light, and it's been going okay. It's just like everything. There's growing pains, and especially when you inherit work, that's always a little tough. But
Yeah.
it's going okay. But I also chose this time to injure the fuck out of my foot, and
Yeah.
How is that going? How are you coping?
I gotta say it's good. At least now that there's a diagnosis of something that's been going on for at least 2 years with my foot.
Yeah.
So I'm sad about it. That's what the diagnosis is, but at least happy that you can pinpoint and treat from this point on. And steroids are a wonderful thing, because this time last week I couldn't walk. I basically couldn't walk,
Yeah.
and by Monday things had cleared up enough that you got a little cocky and you think, oh, I can lift this. You know what I mean? You're supposed to stay off the foot and not put pressure. And I was very smart for once. But no, doing fine now, and
Good.
I'm gonna go to the gym on
Good to
Saturday.
hear.
So,
Yay. That's awesome.
and
Yeah.
but
Well,
it's also like you use that as an excuse to like get scruffy, and I really need to trim this, and the hair is not quite Kenny Rogers yet, but it's getting there. And I just want to have
it's on the cusp.
It's on the cusp. I just want to have a little window with that, because when I do have the business trip over to Fort Worth early next month, I'm definitely gonna buzz by then, because that heat. Ugh. So
yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Feeling better.
That's good. That's good. On my end here, I've just been kind of holding down the fort, taking care of all the animals, which basically consists of me cuddling a lot of furry four-legged creatures and feeding a lot of birds, making sure they do not die. While my husband is off in Colorado, working on an opera right now. He's doing Pirates of Penzance. But that's given me a lot of time to make full use of my AMC A-List membership. And in the past couple of weeks, I've seen at least 6 movies. So
what were they?
I just kind of go 3 days a week and I go.
What were they?
What did you say?
What were they?
Well, let's see. I've seen. I was just mentioning. I just saw Mickey 17.
Yeah.
I saw In the Lost Lands, which is the George R.R. Martin based Paul W.S. Anderson. Looks like a sequel to Resident Evil with Mila Jovovich and Dave Bautista. I actually really like that one. It is not post-apocalyptic sci-fi. It is post-apocalyptic fairy tale. Go in thinking fantasy. Do not go in thinking sci-fi. Let's see, what else? I think I mentioned I saw The Monkey. I have seen The Last Breath, which is the movie based on the documentary about the guy who survived in deep sea, as a deep sea diver for 40 minutes or 30 minutes without oxygen, and came out okay. Very good movie. Let's see, there's a couple other ones too, but just a ton. The thing is, there are certain weeks where there's just nothing showing, and then all of a sudden there'll be like 4 movies that just all come out at the same time that look pretty cool. Like this weekend, we've got Opus starting. That looks great. It's a new John Malkovich sort of horror thriller parody that looks great with Iowa DeViri, I think. And then there's Novocaine, which I've seen, I think, the preview for at least 50 times at this point. So I just want to like watch it and get it out of the way, and see Jack Quaid kind of get beat up, smashed, burned, and set on fire, just for an hour and a half. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming up, but it's, time between big comic book movies is kind of like, okay, let's go. Let's get something else on. Let's get something cool. Let's get some fun. Let me, get my dramas out of the way before, my big super blockbuster, big screen, fun time. Which the next one coming up is, of course, Thunderbolts Asterix, followed by, Superman. I am so looking forward to that, and super looking forward to Fantastic Four as well. So like the two of those are like my big summer. Oh my God, I can't wait. I'll probably see them 2 or 3 times each. And then, of course, Thunderbolts is also going to be good. So
yeah, it's funny you mentioned about when you see a movie trailer a lot. In 1997, I must have seen the trailer for Conspiracy Theory probably like 12, 13 times. And for a while, in my head, I saw the movie, and then I actually had it on in the background. It was like, TNT or something. And I'm like, I've never seen this movie.
Like, but I thought I knew everything about it. I thought I saw the whole. Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about Novocaine. I've seen the Red Band trailer probably 15 times.
Yeah.
At this point, and that's almost entirely in the movie theater. So, like, because I've seen that many movies over the past 3 months.
Yeah.
But it's just, I'm like, I might as well see it and get it out of the way, and then I never have to see it again.
Yeah, but for some reason, I saw Conspiracy Theory for months. I saw that trailer for months. And then when I finally had it on TV, I was like, I actually have never seen this movie.
Well, the worst thing is when you have something like that happen and you've seen the trailer and the trailers lead you to a certain type of expectation of the film, and then you watch it and you realize, like, oh, whoever cut the trailer didn't read the script and had no idea what this movie was about, because it's nothing compared to it. Like, it just doesn't match the film that I just saw. And or the best parts of the movie were the parts that made it to the trailer. And it's like, this was a bad, like, I built this up in my head to be something way worse, but way better than what it is. And I regret my life now.
I also remember, like, the first movie I remember this happening with was The Golden Child, the Eddie Murphy movie.
The Eddie Murphy one, yeah.
Where the trailer, the footage in the trailer had nothing to do with the movie. Like, there was no moment in the trailer that was actually in the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, like, Deadpool versus Wolverine, the teaser trailer was like that. So there it does still happen, but that one I just kind of that just stands out.
Yeah. It is funny, and having seen so many of these trailers multiple times over the past several months, and that's, I think, kind of one of the benefits and or downsides of having an A-list membership and being able to go see movies constantly. And I mean, this is just a drop in the bucket compared to what the movie bears do, and have done. I think last week was South by Southwest, so of course they're seeing like 10 movies a day. But when you go to the same cinema and you're seeing movies multiple times a week, you are seeing the same trailers constantly. And after a while, like, part of you is like, I think I've already seen as much as I want to see that movie. I will not be going to see it when it comes out. And that's been the case for a couple things. But there's been some interesting things that have come up, and I'll probably see them when they come out, and I will let you know if they're any good.
Yeah. But one of those South by Southwest movies I really want to see, Bad Boy, the horror movie from the dog's perspective.
Oh yeah,
I really want to see
that. Look good.
That looks great. Boy, was I New Jersey just then. Boy, did I was New Jersey with dog. Oh my God.
Dog.
I'm so sorry.
What about the dog? Was the dog eating chocolate? That would be.
I bought my dog a chocolate ball.
Love it.
Sorry about that.
Love it.
Well, we did have some news creep in over the last 3 weeks. So cue the news. Audio cue. We're going to have another DC versus Marvel crossover event.
Yeah,
Not
that was
not
pretty
very
cool to hear.
big. I think it's just 2 issues, but apparently CB Cebulski and Marie Javins enjoyed working with each other so much on the George Perez reissue, George, the JLA versus Avengers. JLA Avengers is not versus. That collection that they decided to, shoot it up the ladder about doing another crossover, and it got approved. So
Yeah, which is pretty wild. It's one of those things. I think when was the last time? When was Amalgam Comics? That was
that was 96, 97.
Yeah,
I
I
think
was
the
gonna say
two of them.
mid-nineties.
yeah,
But
96. I want to say it was in the
they had
90s.
crossovers for a while after that.
Yeah,
I think the last one was Superman Fantastic Four in the tabloid form. I think that was the last one. And then there's also like do the Wildstorms count as crossovers after the acquisition? According to the trade collections, they do.
yeah.
So yeah, but though Amalgam was just like like a 2-year thing, they kept going with some of those crossovers after a while.
Yeah. It's just it's one of those things where I don't think I don't think most of them, anybody who's in their early 20s at this point has had
Oh no, not for a while.
a time where they would be able to experience a crossover with Marvel and DC. I remember like when I was a little kid, there was like several, I think, Superman versus Spider-Man, or Superman Spider-Man, or Superman and the Hulk.
Yeah, with the early '80s, you had 3.
Yeah, it was like
the
a
second
digest.
Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, and the Incredible Hulk, and then the wonderful New Teen Titans X-Men. I loved that crossover. That was which I think is some of Walt Simon's best art, and that I love that crossover.
I forgot about that one altogether. Yeah. I don't think I ever saw that when I was young enough that it was coming out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, whenever you'd see the other company referenced in the work of the other company, like it was always like a little oh look, the artist would throw it in, or whatever. And then of course Image came along, and books like Spawn that would reference very openly and directly DC and Marvel, and how awful it was to work for them. And creator exploitation. So like you would get a lot of those references, but it wouldn't be the same because it wasn't done for just the love of the fun and craziness of it all. Of having superheroes from one crossover with another companies. But I'm looking forward to it. I'll definitely pick it up when it comes out.
I thought that was also a really cheeky way of announcing it, with CB just joining the DC panel. And what are you doing here? I like that, because it's I just like things that we're so disunified as a nation right now. To see unity in any capacity is enjoyable. So, happy to see that. And apparently, there's also a new publisher, Ignition Comics, which sounds like it's very much in the distillery mode.
Yeah, and I think
Cullen Bunn is doing a couple of the titles on that, which is good. I always like seeing when Cullen Bunn. The dude is just prolific. Like he is a very quick writer. He's a very good writer. He's written some of my favorite comics. So it's always good to see when he's getting work. I still don't understand what happened between him and whatever the main. I mean, even the big three. Like he's too good to be relegated to just offshoot comics. So I don't know, but I love seeing him come back.
Yeah. With Cullen Bunn, I mean, he's just one of the creators that's been tapped for this. I think Bill, you mentioned Stephanie Williams is going to be
Leah Williams
creating some work for that. Leah Williams is going to be creating some work for it. Like
Cy Spurrier.
Cy Spurrier. Yep. And the format is going to be similar to Distilleries in that it's premium. I'm not sure if it's going to be oversized. I believe it is. But it's definitely going to be premium format, so higher priced, but also higher quality. Kind of right in that niche. And it's unfortunate that DSTLRY kind of signed that exclusivity distribution agreement with Diamond right before the Diamond bankruptcy announcement.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to really affect them all that much, but obviously, anybody who's got an exclusivity distribution with Diamond right now is probably waiting on the next couple of weeks because the auction is happening very soon, and everything's going to be completed by next month. Or it kind of has to be.
And we're all waiting to see what the last issue of previews will be.
Yeah, I mean, I got two copies. I got
I got two pre-ordered
and the March book.
Yeah, I got two pre-ordered. Yeah, I also received because they were late to print on the February.
Right.
So I did receive February, March in the same shipment, just like you did from DCBS. And they have solicited 2 more out. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I imagine the April has a good shot of being printed.
Yeah.
But the May, I don't know. And again, like you said, a lot of it depends on what the outcome of the auction is.
And of course, Free Comic Book Day. I mean, they've already been having a lot of issues with that. Anything that's already been printed, which I believe all the Boom books have been printed.
Mm-hmm.
Those have actually all gone out to stores, which in some cases was a bit of a problem because they also billed it immediately.
Yeah. But some publishers like Mad Cave, I think they canceled 4 of their 6.
Yep.
Was it Mad Cave?
Several,
who did that? Yeah.
Several of them canceled it. Did Bandit Graphics canceled theirs?
Yes. Yeah. Which was essentially a Marvel one, which is frustrating.
IDW, I think, canceled it. There was a list of them, a list of several publishers that canceled the majority or all of their offerings for Free Comic Book Day. And of course, anything that's not yet printed, kind of up in the air, especially with the on again, off again tariffs. Will they, won't they? What's going to happen? We don't know because they change every other day. But whatever happens in May, it is not going to be, Diamond as we know it, who would be providing that.
Yeah.
Going forward, it would be whoever else. I think PRH also has is going to be distributing whatever free comic books
that they normally and DC
like Marvel.
DC has some offerings,
an Image,
too, which were solicited separately. And I think did they also solicit the Superman Day stuff at the same time? I think if not close in time, if not very close in time.
Yeah, I mean those I think those they've already started showing up in solicits. I know DCBS had like something for the pre-orders.
Yeah. So if the Free Comic Book Day weren't at the same time as the Superman Day, they were fairly close. They may not have been the same solicit period, but like weeks away. I'm not sure.
Depressing.
Depressing, but it'll be interesting to see where things play out. It's gonna be interesting, and it's also gonna be interesting what Diamond's back stock is gonna have. What's gonna happen?
Yeah, that's also true.
Are we gonna have like, Dollar Tree packs of 3 for like years to come? Or Ollie's,
everything.
Because it's substantial. It's not Mile High Comics level, but it's substantial. So
it is. It just depends on, and also what they're going to do with the Olive Branch distribution center. I mean, if whoever takes over is going to stay there, which I would hope they would, all of that inventory.
Mm-hmm. And some of that inventory, there's no publishers to return it to anymore.
Right.
They don't exist, so it'll be interesting.
So my question to you guys is, has there been any indication of who some of the bidders might be at the auction? I've been looking to try to see if there's any other because like I said, their backstock is big, to see if anybody is going to try to get into the game. and I haven't found anything. So I'm curious about who's actually going to show up to bid on this.
Only thing I saw was that there was a very promising bidder for Baltimore Magazine, which is so far away, so far removed from most of their business. That was the only thing I saw.
Okay.
That it's some local publisher that does very similar material in the DC area. I think they made you like DC's Arts paper. That was the only one I saw made mention, which is surprising because you think you'd hear some rumblings like, Random House, aiming for Free Comic Book Day, things like that. You think you'd hear some, but there's a little bit of toxicity to a lot of this too. So
Uncle Bob will bid on all of it, says Wendy Freeman. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. Inside joke.
I mean,
and big congrats to Wendy with some of her airplay.
Facts.
Being sandwiched between the replacements and 9 Inch Nails on the Chicago station, that is so awesome. That is so awesome. Congrats, Wendy.
I mean, dude, she's a friend. She knows that we're proud of her, but super proud of her just for getting that. I mean, just the music is fantastic. Putting herself out like that, just the work that she did on that is, I love her, and I'm so proud of her for what she, for the efforts that and the product that she put forward. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So I think the only thing that we have left about the bankruptcy cases is, I think, wait a week, and that's the start of the auction. No, less than a week. It's the 17th. I think it's the 17th that I heard is the start of the auction period. And only lasts 10 days.
And in terms of product, I guess the two that are out or that have the most marquee value are Daredevil, Born Again, and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I've only seen the first episode of Daredevil, Born Again.
It's really good. It's really it took the tone of the first Daredevil kind of season from Marvel, mixed in some of the darkness of the Punisher in there with it, and brought it's hard to watch just because it's art imitating life in a lot of ways right now, but it also goes along with the Charles Soule. I struggle with it because Born Again is so iconic, right? When you say Born Again, I think of Frank Miller. I think of very specific things, and most of those things are not in there, right? It's Born Again kind of by name alone, but there are some of the same themes in there with it. So, if you're looking for Frank in an adaptation of Frank Miller's Born Again, you're not going to find it, but it's really gritty, really violent, really well written.
It's so funny because we've already had elements of that in the original Daredevil series, in Jessica Jones. There's elements of that in there with Nuke. It's strange that I wish they kind of held that back because it is very, even though it's small screen, it's a very cinematic feeling story. And
it is. I
the first time I ever cried at a comic book. The first time I ever cried at a comic book.
It's a hard read. I've got the omnibus on my shelf, and it's just
when Matt hears Maggie's heartbeat.
Mm.
And that's enough of a spoiler. But I was like,
but yeah, if you haven't watched it yet,
oh god, that is a wonderful moment.
So I haven't seen the third episode yet, which is out now. I've watched the first two.
That's good. It's definitely good. I do like they've leaned very heavily into the to the courtroom side of things, at least at this stage in the series, and of course dropping the hints of Punisher related plot items. It's interesting, and I'm really curious to see how they're going to go because I haven't read a lot of Daredevil, so for me, like if they're pulling in elements from different storylines, I may not recognize it, but it does bode well. It's capturing my attention pretty strongly, as much as the original first season did.
I don't think it's spoiling anything out of the first episode. How did you guys feel about the this version of the villain? I can't remember if the villain is shown, so I don't want to spoil anything. If the villain's shown in like any of the adverts or anything for it, but there's a very prominent villain that's a very prominent Daredevil villain that's shown in this.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I thought they did a fantastic job of just showing maximum violence, maximum carnage for absolutely no goddamn reason, just because they can.
Yeah,
I thought that fight scene was really great, and I thought the choreography was very reminiscent of the hallway scene, which I love.
Yeah. The old boy.
Yeah, trying to get that sort of like one take feel. I mean, there were multiple takes, obviously, in this.
And also, and there's something about, and this is going to be the absolute weirdest comparison, but I was so impressed with the choreography for Abracadabra on Lady Gaga's SNL appearance, and there's some comparisons when you have, whether it's fight or dance choreography in very confined spaces.
Yeah.
Just how impressive that could be, and we definitely had that in both. So I was not prepared to compare Abracadabra to Daredevil Born Again at all. But
anybody listening or watching at home, do your mashup work.
Yeah,
do your mashup work. We want to see that Daredevil bullseye fight.
Abracadabra.
Speaking of Lady Gaga, and also just because entropy and chaos, have either of you listened to the new Lady Gaga album?
No.
Just the two singles.
Yeah. So I took some time to actually listen to the whole album, and as far as just the music wise, this might be one of my favorite Lady Gaga albums.
Yeah.
She gets really heavy into the pop synth stuff, and she, reading some interviews, she talks about it. She's like, I was listening to Trent Reznor, I was listening to Ministry, I was listening to the Chicago industrial scene. I'm a big fan of Duran Duran and stuff like that.
She name checked Front 242.
Right, yeah.
In that interview, yeah. So that's very cool. And I also, it's interesting, like some of her conversations about Trent Reznor. It's like one of the few rock stars she just can't meet. She gets too nervous.
That's hilarious.
That's arms are pretty scary.
And Abracadabra, it's buried, but there's use of a Susie and the Banshee sample in it.
Yep, there is.
That is just chef's kiss to me, because I see the through line. I definitely see the through line. So
yeah, I thought it was great. And now some of the actual singing and the lyrics, it's kind of stock. There's a lot of it. If you're listening to it, it's like I can hear your previous hits in that. Like you're using some of the same time signatures and the same kind of lyricism there, but the music itself is really good. So I thought it was great.
Okay, so I'm sure we'll report back when we have a few more Daredevil Born Again episodes under our belt. I am planning at some point to watch Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It's also really good. I've kind of just had blinders on about 50s and 60s television while I've been home. I recently finished up the Twilight Zone, a rewatch of all 5 seasons. So, and man, scripted TV really doesn't get better than that. It really hasn't gotten much better than that in 65 years. So, but we are called the Comic Book Bears, and I think it's time that we move on to comic books. So let's start with Steve. I think probably we should go with our little kind of dynamic where we talk about the big two books first, because we do have a lot of indie books to talk about tonight. So Steve, why don't you talk about your DC team book, which I have also read.
Yes. So
for real. Okay.
Anyway, so it has been a minute since we've talked about Green Lantern.
On this show, I think the last time we talked about was Grant Morrison's.
Yeah,
honestly,
it's been a while since I think it was like season 1, maybe season 2. I think we talked about, but I mean it's been quite some time, and a lot has happened. There's been so much happening on the Green Lantern side of things, with the Corps, with OA, with the entire spectrum, all the different lanterns, lantern batteries, all that stuff. Basically, long story short, the slate is wiped more or less clean. So the only remaining power battery is the green power battery on OA. The Guardians are gone. All of the other Spectrum cores are gone.
Well, the Guardians are around, but they're in an advisory position. They're not leading things, and there aren't as many of them.
There's a couple.
Yeah,
there's like a couple, the usual, the ones that are recognizable. But generally, the Lantern Corps themselves are being tasked with rebuilding the entire Corps, rebuilding the entire group, finding new lanterns. Because again, that process, all of that is no more. There is no power battery. Well, I mean, the power battery exists, but it's no longer seeking out new lanterns. Basically, they are responsible for finding new lanterns. And so I'm talking about the new Green Lantern Corps #1, the new series. And this is brought to you by Jeremy Adams, Morgan Hampton, Fernando Passarin, Auclair Albert, and Arif Prianto. It's a big group of great creators who are working on this title. So, as is usual for the Green Lantern Corps, a lot of the focus is on the human or the Earth-based Green Lanterns, but this is taking place in space. The first issue is primarily on OA, with then a mission that goes off to Tamaran, and the main protagonists that we're following here are, of course, John Stewart. We do see Guy Gardner very briefly, but you also have Miss Malign over there, who was the Green Lantern. Oh gosh, what was the title that she was in? That was excellent. Was it Green Lantern Beyond?
Oh God, I can't think of Joe Mullins. I cannot think of
Joe Malign.
Frontier.
I love that series. It's been such a minute for that one too.
You know about Far Sector?
Yes, Far Sector.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. It took me a second to catch up with you. Yeah, Far Sector.
Yeah, Far Sector, which was really good, and again, several years ago,
probably one of my favorite Green Lantern runs.
Now.
Yeah, top 3 Green Lantern stories for me of all time.
Well, and the fact that it took place in on one planet, it took place. It was a very closed story, but based on a very detective-based story. Very cool. But you also have other characters from some of the more recent Green Lantern Corps runs. You of course have Simon, Baz, and Jessica Cruz, who are the two of the more newer Earth-based lanterns as well. Leading this. In fact, Jessica Cruz is now essentially the leader of all the Green Lantern Corps. So anyway, in this particular story,
can we also go back? We also have Teen Lantern.
Yeah,
Teen Lantern. Yes, from Brazil.
Yep.
Who created her own power? Power battery on her back that she's able to use, sort of like as a gauntlet. And I think that was taken. Part of it, I can barely remember it because again, we're talking several years ago now.
Young Justice.
But it had something to do with
Wonder Comics. Yeah.
Yes, Young Justice was part of that. I'm trying to think. She also was in one of the other Green Lantern Corps books that was more recent.
Yeah.
So, but it's very cool, very neat. It's basically going back to that, except there, of course, are a dearth of other lanterns that we do sorely miss, who are no more part of the DC universe. They've been killed off or whatever happened. And so, of course, in this one, we see them, getting to work, getting rid of, I believe it's Kanja Rowe, who is, trying to kidnap a bunch of aliens. And the Corps rushes in to go and save them and arrest him. It's a pretty cool, quick fight. And then, of course, they go back to OA, where it's time for bureaucracy. And you can just kind of see just the craziness that's going on in the background here, where, here's John with Kanja Rowe just kind of, hauling him off to the science cells. And Joe's got something going on. You've got Gardner's got a water baby alien of some sort that's kind of, he's dealing with in the background that's really not, not front and center. There's just a lot of stuff, a lot of chaos that's going on in here. And one of the things that I really like about this is that it shows Oa as kind of like a living and breathing world again, which it's been kind of dead. It's been, either under oppression or, deserted or whatever in the past several years. So it's nice to see it busy again as like almost as a real sort of like space cop precinct. It's kind of fun. I always liked that sort of in the 80s and the 90s Green Lantern. And of course they get sent off to Tamarin because there is some kind of big emotional spectrum something that's happening there. And when they get there, it is essentially Ixal, the goddess of Tamarin, as a 200-foot tall golden fear construct smashing its way through the city. They encounter Black Star. They help her try to subdue this. But really, the hero of the day happens to be Sinestro, who is now back part of the Green Lantern Corps again. Because the Yellow Lanterns have been disbanded, broken up. Powers have been removed or drained, and the battery is no more. But he sees and understands what's happening here because, of course, he's so intimately acquainted with fear and the power of that part of the emotional spectrum that he's able to find who's generating this giant fear construct. And with his knowledge, but also the fact that he's actually a great Green Lantern, aside from being mostly evil through, the past 50 years, is that he's able to understand what she's going through and help her overcome that fear. And in doing so, she ends up being a new Tamaranian Green Lantern. They choose to make her Green Lantern because she's overcome this great fear and clearly has, affinity to the emotional spectrum. But this just kind of highlights what's going on in the greater DC universe because the emotional spectrum has been so splintered and fractured that we're seeing some strange new lanterns pop up. Like we did see the Lantern of Sorrow pop up, but a lot of other emotional offshoots are going to be being created. And really, it's now up to the Corps to find these people who are so immensely powerful and affected by the emotional spectrum that they're creating these new types of lanterns and steer them, rather than destroy them or try to kill them or put them in prison, to steer them to being able to use their powers for good, for the good of the universe. So it's a really good trajectory. They clearly laid out the plot for the series, and I'm really excited for it. And of course, on the last page, we get a nice little surprise guest who is going to be factoring pretty prominently in the next several issues as John Stewart and company travel to a particular planet that is known for large bird-like symbols. People like to wear wings. They're going to be showing up. So I'm pretty excited in the direction that this is going. I like that they've laid out the expectations for this book so well, and the art's great. It's exciting, it's dynamic, it's fun, and I can't wait to read more. And it's been a while since I've really sat down and read a lot of Green Lantern stuff, and this is making me excited to read it again.
Steve, I was wondering, did you get the prelude to this, the Green Lantern Fractured Spectrum, which kind of sets this up?
Yes.
You did get that?
Yeah, okay. I do have it. I haven't read it yet, though. I flipped through it, and I know some of the things that come out of it.
But it sets up this, and it also sets up where Hal is going, and I think it makes a lot of sense for Hal to be the Green Lantern as far as Earth is concerned right at the moment. I really like this issue as well. I think there's so many cool directions that this can go in. I thought some of the character development was wonderful, particularly Jessica Cruz. You're talking about a character who was, a survivalist, has had so many social anxiety issues, and here she is thrust in the position of a leader, and she's actually blossoming
Yeah,
in that,
she's
and she's
thriving.
actually feeling good about it. I thought some of the moments they had with her was fine. I love that Black Star had the hots for Jon Stewart. I love that
He's
you
an
know
acceptable concubine.
that they incorporate Sinestro in back into the core in a way that makes sense. You know,
Yes.
because I do think some of the times in the past where he has been reincorporated, at the beginning of New 52 and stuff, it was a little janky,
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
this seems to make more sense. What how he stays, we'll see. But the prospect of seeing, what we now have a Tamaranian Green Lantern, with the dissolution of the United Planets. I imagine a lot of those planets. I'd love to see a Coon Lantern. How cool would that be?
Right.
So I think we're going to get a little bit of a tour of the universe as things go forward. But again, we are very much concentrated on Thanagar, and just like Justice League Unlimited, I love that they're incorporating elements of the storylines for these characters that came from outside of the comics with
Right.
the appearance of
Right.
that last appearance of the last phase of one of my all-time favorite characters. So
Right.
mhm.
So yeah, I'm just so excited for the direction of this book. So can't wait to keep reading it.
Yep.
Well, and once again, story wise, DC is, we've been praising DC, but I don't think we can also go by without mentioning how good the artwork in that book is.
Right.
There are books at DC right now. They're actually, believe it or not, for the first time in a long time, there's fewer books that I dislike than I like, right? Because like most of the books are just good. There are some out there that are not great, but even in those books, the artwork is phenomenal. Like just the editorial team at DC right now, they're working as a team, right? There is a cohesion there, and there is a vision there that everybody is sharing, and it's almost like your editorial teams are talking to each other instead of everybody doing their own thing and having their own offices and not really caring about. And look, I've said before, I'm wishy-washy when it comes to continuity on these things, right? Like, I don't need everything to fit in continuity. I'm okay with some stories going on and having their own thing, but one of the things that makes the Big Two magical is the shared universe aspect on it, right? We need to be reminded, both visually and in the stories, that these things are interconnected to some degree. And DC is doing a fantastic job about that while operating with two different universes, right? Like, they've got the absolute universe and they've got the regular universe, but they still tie everything in together in really cool ways. And not that we've seen them get tied together functionally, other than the Aquaman book, but everything is working, and it feels like a shared universe, as opposed to Marvel right now, which really feels like a bunch of motherfuckers in separate rooms who don't have each other's phone numbers, right? Like, they're just not on the same, they're not even on the same page. Hell, they're not in the same library. And
well, the fax machine just isn't working anymore, and so they really need to get that fixed before they continue with a lot of these crossovers.
Yeah, Bill, you were talking about CB Cebulski earlier, and then you made a mention about how cool it is to see Unity in there. So I kind of shut my mouth, but I just don't understand why CB Cebulski has a job right now. That is not fit for that, and it's not like, just needs to go.
This might be
He's such a nice guy, though.
This might be his job interview for DC. I mean,
I hope not. Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what's not like, I just don't get it right now. Yeah. And there are books at Marvel that I love. I'm not knocking the entire line. Like, there's some great stuff, but I just don't understand what is the lack of cohesion with what should be the premier publisher in the industry right now.
I mean, it's the fiefdoms. It's the fiefdoms issue, where you have, like, here's your X-Men fiefdom, here's your Avengers fiefdom, here's your Spider fiefdom, all that stuff. They really don't like to interact well.
Now that you're talking about this, I just have this mental picture of, like, my cousin Vinny reactions. What, you gonna call the X office? No, I hate him. Are you sure? Okay. Sorry. And with that beautiful lead-in, I'm going to talk about a Marvel book that I like.
Do it. I'm here for it, man.
Now, I was deciding on what book. Now, this is just a very brief cameo of this. have you ever bought a book knowing that an element of the book sucked?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
knowing, like, I gotta tell you
Yeah,
guys, there was no way I could pass up Red Hulk #1 with the Frank Miller cover. There was no way I could pass that up. Okay, that's it. But the book that I chose has a much more appealing cover, as far as I'm concerned, by the Dodsons. And this is a book written by J. Michael Straczynski with art by Bernard Chang. And it is the one shot Captain America and Volstagg. So there is a series of 6 one shots that JMS is writing, of mostly like unconventional team ups. We've already had Rocket Raccoon and Doctor Doom. There's the team up coming up of Mr. Fury, of Nick Fury and Fing Fang Foom. Some are a little more
Mr.
traditional,
Fury.
like Doctor Strange and Hulk, but um, considering that JMS wrote some of the best Brave and the Bold stories when he was on that title for about a year, this was something I was excited about, and it paid off. So this is, again, Captain America and Volstagg. It takes place in the present day, even though these are two people who technically known each other since the 40s. And where it starts off is Captain America is involved in a car chase. He's on a motorcycle, but he's chasing a high-powered car through the streets of Berlin, where all of a sudden he goes up a rainbow bridge up into Asgard. He wasn't planning it. Sif kind of coordinated this. So um, he gets transported to Asgard, and he's there for a reason. And the reason he's there is because Volstagg. That's actually the end. That's actually the last frame, Steve. And how could you not love Captain America riding a motorcycle on the Rainbow Bridge? I mean, that's
I just love this image. This
Yeah.
is such a great image. It should be the cover, really. But
yeah.
it's
But if you could go to one of the other images, so right here. So this is how this happens, and for the first 4 pages, there's very few bits of dialogue to kind of set everything up. So why he's there is because Volstagg needs his help. Now you all know Volstagg as one of the Warriors 3, and he hasn't had a lot of solo time, and it was really interesting in the story exploring his character. It turns out that throughout time, Odin has sent people on different missions outside of the teams and outside of things with Thor and the Frost Giants and all that. Sometimes it's just reconnaissance. Sometimes it's just trying to gauge what else is happening in the universe. So during one of these missions, Volstagg traveled to a planet called Trigon. And on Trigon, there was a very peaceful home planet populace, but unfortunately, they at one point were invaded by a group of invaders. I guess that's the way you pronounce it, called the Kra, who were really evil, just aimed at decimating the landscape of a beautiful planet. And while Volstagg is there, he ends up falling in love with one of the freedom fighters, with Sylvie. However, Volstagg is married, has kids, and it's never consummated. It's just on basically a spiritual level. And he has heard through chatter that the Kra have invaded again, and he knows he can come and be the hero, but he is worried that the Kra have adapted to his tactics. So he needs somebody who's excellent during a war campaign, that they might not see the plans coming, and who better than Steve Rogers. So Steve, if you could just show some of the images as we're talking. Here's Volstagg with his big belly. It's just beautiful that his first introduction in the comic is he's eating, and he eats a lot through the story. And Steve's doing the little rubby thing for people who are listening to the audio version, because that's the way he's wired. If you can keep going with the images. This is going to cover some of the stuff I talked about. Steve needs an outfit. Steve needs a Guardian outfit. Steve doesn't look too happy in his Guardian outfit.
That doesn't mesh well.
But as Volstagg says there, I never discuss fashion or ideology on an empty stomach. So that gives him a cue to eat again. And Steve, if you can keep going with some of the images here, this is some of the imagery on the planet. So you see Sylvie and you see Volstagg, and then I think there's one more image that we can cover here. For the people. And this is a beautiful page by Bernard Chang of the Warriors 3 with Thor together. And I think this says a lot about Volstagg's personality. If you can read here, to all groups, there is one leader with a great heart. There is the dark and brooding one. There is the dashing and handsome one. And there is the one that makes the others laugh. And Volstagg says he never planned to have this role. He trained to be a warrior. He never planned to be, the comic relief, but he just kind of fell into that. And because of that, many times he's underestimated. And what happens is they go to Trigon, they set a new precedent. They defeat the Krah, they liberate the planet very quickly, like it's a couple hours. And after they do that, he implores Steve to join to do something for him, and Steve provides this cover story that Volstagg actually died in battle because he thought it was only right for Sylvie, who's still effectively a young woman, though Volstagg is immortal, that she find love, that their relationship, he knows, is never going to go anywhere. So there's subterfuge, but there is heart behind it. And then Steve, if you can go through another image, one more. This is beautiful. Beautiful colors. But one more. This was also a bit of a reveal. Steve, I think there's one more image here. So as Steve and Volstagg are getting to know each other, they talk about, your mastery of English is beautiful. How did that happen? And Volstagg comments, that they've always brought people up to Asgard so that they can learn the language. And Chaucer was brought up to Asgard to teach Thor, but Volstagg wasn't there that day. So he actually learned English from Ben Franklin and gave him a gift, the gift of electricity. Just a really nice button on a really touching story.
So
and
it's funny how often Ben Franklin has a low key Marvel legacy.
Yeah.
For those of you who might be Deadpool fans, you might remember that for a very long time, the ghost of Ben Franklin palled around with Deadpool and company. So Ben Franklin has a very large canonical footprint in Marvel history, and that's really cool. I've never that's hilarious to me.
Yeah, but it was nice to have a story that's a done in one. It's a dying art in terms of mainstream comics. It really is, and to have something like this that you aren't dedicated to 4 or 5 issues, and that you can tell a story that's impactful, that has heart, that flows, that's energetic. I do wish more writers would deliberately do that. I wish they would deliberately involve themselves at least once a year in a story like that, because it does feel like it's a dying dynamic. Yeah. So really, really recommend this. Like you said, there's some Marvel that's just La Bamba, and there's some Marvel that's hitting on all strides, and this definitely is in the latter.
We have a comment here from Victor Rose. Hello, Victor. Would be a good poster, the motorcycle on a rainbow, and I'm just going to go ahead and put that up here again.
Also, in the story, Sif is a fantastic mechanic. She makes a lot of the vehicles and a lot of the weapons that the Asgardians utilize. So she made some changes to this motorcycle, but she left it with him just wait and see. So I hope this motorcycle appears later too. It might do some really cool things.
I think I'm curious to know, and this is just it's a very niche thing I'm about to say, and it's totally because I'm a nerd and also spend a lot of time on Harleys and love motorcycles. But I feel like Disney or Marvel and Harley must have a deal because like the bike that you just showed is a Dyno Wide Glide, and like that's what it's based off of. And they use a lot of Harley models, like new Harleys for those things. And it's always nice to see that because they do like I love when
now that you're saying it, you rarely see a crotch rocket.
No, yeah, it's
Marvel.
especially with
rarely see one. That's true.
well with Steve, it's canonically it's an American motorcycle, right? It's American steel, American metal. It's a American V twin. But they very specifically use Harley for that, and there's not a lot of American motorcycles companies left. But I really love when you get to see those drawn really well.
Yep.
It's kind of like when you get to see like a 1967 Mustang drawn in comics, and they just nail it. It just that's cool.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we're gonna dip our toes in the more indie side of things. So, Caleb.
So I'm gonna break the mold a little bit. I have not been reading a whole lot of kind of mainstream comics lately. Still reading a ton of comics. I've been actually going back and I've taken a pause, not to sound like a grumpy old man, right? But I've taken a pause on reading newer Marvel and DC. I still read some newer DC on the app, but I'm going back and reading a lot of the stuff on this shelf back here, right? Because I own it. Some of it's still in the wrap. I've never read it, so reading a lot of older Marvel stuff and still going through the original Submariner series and just wrapped up the Thunderbolts Red Hulk. But in my free time, I'm reading a lot of indie stuff because again, I've started reading a lot more digital comics and downloading the apps. And I read a book this week that really struck a chord with me, and I really enjoyed it. And actually, I've gone back and reread it just for fun because it's a really interesting story. And it's not new. It's actually was originally published in 2012 or 2013 from a Spanish publisher that is called Astaberry Ediciones. But it was printed in English in 2023 by Top Shelf Productions, which is a IDW spinoff. And the book is called Ashes, and it's by a comic artist and storyteller, Àlvaro Ortiz. And like I said, the book really struck a chord with me just because of how fun it is. It is zany, but it's also very heartfelt, if that makes sense. Like it's very human, but also has a lot of weird curves and just fun, nonsensical aspects to it. And they do a really so Mr. Ortiz does a really good job on the first page about summarizing kind of the length of the book, right? He's going to tell you kind of where you're going with this. He's telegraphing his moves so he can fill in the details and just make it fun. But the story is really about these three friends. Well, technically four friends, but it's these three friends who meet together on a road trip for a particular reason. And on that road trip, they get to deal with kind of a pirate mystery. They've got a map with an X. They don't know what's there and where they're going. There's drug runners involved there. There are two twin brothers who look like a mix between death metal and ZZ Top. One of them's got a hook for a hand. There's a monkey that steals things. I mean, it's very zany and wacky and weird, but it's really, really fun. And it's an all-encompassing kind of OGN. But the story really centers around three characters, right? There is these three kind of a trio of friends from back in the day. I'm going to use that quote. But Polly, Moho, and Peter are these three friends, and they all met. Kind of strange circumstances brought them together. They met at a bar, right? Because Polly, grew up, I guess kind of lower middle class, but she didn't want to follow the mold, so she ends up becoming she works at coffee places as a barista, and then she's kind of a punk rock in a punk rock band. And she meets Moho, who's always kind of this down on his luck, not the best person, never really getting his wheels together. And then Peter is a bigger kind of, he's the one, if you're looking at the screen on the far left of the thing, he's kind of a bearish guy, a heart of gold, right? Just loves everybody, is just as kind as can be, never anything bad to say about anybody or anything like that. And they become friends because they're kind of just social outcasts. But as as time goes on, they kind of fall apart. But there was a fourth person in this friend group, right? And that was this individual named Hector. And Hector was a wild card. Hector, he's one of those people who he's a friend at the moment, right? And then he's going to go off and live his life. And what the time that you had was great, but he may not contact you again for a while. But unfortunately, the crux of the story and the things that brings these characters back together after about 5 years of not really talking to each other is that Hector dies, right? And you never get to see Hector as a character in the story, but Hector dies and tells his family, I want to be cremated, and I want you to give my ashes to my friends. You need to contact Polly and give them this map. And the map will take them on a road trip, and there is an X. And I'm not going to tell them what the X is. They have no idea. But their job is going to be to deliver my ashes to this particular spot. And he's arranged things to do this. And what you end up getting is this really fantastic road trip of a story, right? Where these three characters who they all used to be very tight-knit, but over the years they've fallen apart. They have to reconnect suddenly after not talking for a while. Polly is actually very disingenuous. She doesn't tell them that Hector is dead. She actually organizes this by telling them they're all going to take a road trip together. Moho doesn't really want to. He's doing his own thing. You find out why later, but they all get together and they're like, oh, what the fuck, Hector? Like, why didn't he have to come on this trip? Why did I have to do it? And about the day 2 of the road trip, Polly pops the trunk and just shows them the ashes and kind of tells them what they're actually doing and surprises them all, which is an interesting twist. And especially for friends that haven't spoken in a while and they have these trust issues and why are they doing this? They didn't necessarily want to be here. But really, Peter is the cohesive point here. He brings them all together as they go on this trip. And they congeal, right? They get on the same page. They're like, yeah, we need to do this for our friend. We don't know what's out there, but who knows this? And he's a jokester, right? These ashes, and just maybe some bonfire ashes. He may be waiting on us at the end of this thing. This could be a practical joke. We don't know. And so they go on this trip. And I should mention that Moho, in order to provide a little bit of levity to the series, Moho's got a pet monkey that he brings with him. And this monkey is he's a former circus monkey that was trained to do all these things. And really all he does is just he goes out and steals things and gets it and brings it back. And Moho gives him a place to live. But what you find out through this series as they go through on this road trip, where again, things aren't necessarily the way they seem, is that each of these individuals is aimless and they're a little bit lost. And all of them are missing a person in their life, be it if somebody that they loved or somebody that they cared about or their friend Hector. None of them have a very stable relationship with. They're not good at being adults. I'll say that. Like their housing status is unstable. They're all kind of staying places that they don't have any real tethers to. And throughout the story, as they go on these adventures and they end up in these just bizarre situations over a 6-day road trip, they realize that the reason that they're in the positions that they're in and is because their family structure was each other, right? And that's what I'm saying. It's kind of an on-nose element of the story, but they needed each other, right? And they haven't been. They're aimless because the things that brought them direction or the things that kind of solidified their foundation in life were each other, and they kind of abandoned that as life moved on. Moho is one of the most interesting characters in this, right? Like this dude is just down on his luck, and he has kind of done some bad stuff. Like, he needs money. He lost his job, so he links up with a kind of a drug runner and is doing small favors. But as he, interesting story about Moho, and it plays in a big part of the story is Moho loves music, right? Kind of like we all do. Moho fancied himself for a long time as trying to be a music journalist, but he could never get his shit together. So he lands a job with a newspaper to do these music journalisms, write these articles about concerts and interviews and stuff. But he's hungover the first day and he misses it. So what does he do? He fakes it. He writes a fake interview about this band that he saw. And they publish it, but nobody reads it. So he just goes on. He gets another interview. And what happens? Something like he gets a flat tire, doesn't make it, writes a fake interview. He does like 180 of these fake interviews for this music journal. And no one catches on until he writes a fake interview with a really bullshit garbage country music artist who I like to pretend is Morgan Wallen because I hate that piece of shit. He's a detriment to sound. But he writes this journal and just basically says like, hey, this guy's got no talent and is whatever, but here's the things that he says in life. Well, somehow this gets back to the musician who then hires these people to chase him down and ruin his life and like basically puts out a hit. By the way, the country music singer, this cowboy, is secretly gay. There are all of these things, and that's one of the things that Moho says. He's like, yeah, I listened to the stuff, man, and he's doing this interview. He's like, what about all the homoerotic undertones? And just kind of like low-key outs the guy in this fake interview. And so the guy puts a hit on him, which is where your ZZ Top metal guys with hooks on their hands come in. And they're chasing them all the while this trio of friends are on this road trip, right? Again, weird and zany. I won't tell you the crux of the story, but where they end up, they are wrong. Hector is not alive. These are really Hector's ashes. But in Hector's travels, he goes and he finds this deserted island, and he ends up buying a house and kind of refurbishes it. And he knows that their friend Peter is a bibliophile, is obsessed with books and loves it. And one of his favorite books is really about this story about the Hotel Universal, right? Which is it's a big metaphor, and I don't know that the book actually exists or not, but he sets up this hotel for these guys to end up moving into and gives them a place. All the while, Ortiz, who wrote the story, is interspersing the narrative with these historical blips about the origins and literal acts of cremation. Like, where did cremation come from? What different societies have done cremation? Who all played into it? We have these things all across the world and throughout history of cremation. And he's telling this story while also giving you fun facts, right, about the history of it that lead up to a certain point, and give you some insight to where this is going. I really thought this was something special. I love the cartoon tuning style. It's very I don't think basic is the word, but it's distilled, right? Reminds me a lot of crap. Now that I want to think of it, I can't think of the word. This is bad radio. I apologize. Reminds me a lot of a little bit of Tom Gold. If you look at Tom Gold strips, there's some Tom Gold in there.
Yeah.
But also there was a kung fu book a few years ago about a hobo who jumps trains and does kung fu, and I cannot think of that. I have had my notes written down and now I can't find it. But has that kind of simplistic cartooning style.
Yeah.
And I just absolutely love it. It's
a fun book. It's a much more recent name, but I'm also seeing like a Patrick Horvath vibe, who most recently came to some prominence with In the Trees Where No One Sees.
Are you thinking Chris Schweitzer?
Yes.
And Kyle Stark's Rock Candy Mountain. So Chris Schweitzer, I was seeing very much a Chris Schweitzer vibe with some of the art. Obviously not exactly the same, but very much like that sort of kind of fun cartoony style. Right. Even though there's some very serious stuff going on, like the characters are.
Rock Candy Mountain is the one that stood out for me in this, and that was absolutely what I was trying to think of and couldn't. And I had it written down, and I've lost my paper, so I apologize for the shitty radio. But it does. It has that mix of it goes back to old, it is pure cartooning, and there is some of that Tom Gold in there, right, where they're taking and they're showing you, what these characters can do, but you don't need a lot of detail, and that adds to the fun, the fun of it, right? It adds to the zaniness of it, which again, I keep using that word because that's just the best way to describe this. I mean, you've got a monkey thief who goes and steals wine with his dick hanging out everywhere. I mean, it's quirky and odd, but it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend this. Again, I read this. It's published by Top Shelf, which is an IDW, but I read this on the comics app that I have been reading a lot, which is, if I can get my shit to work, which is the Global Comics app, which I highly recommend because there's just thousands upon thousands of comics that are available to you, including some DC comics, IDW, Image Comics. You can catch up on Image Transformers right now if you want to on that app. I'm going to preach and promote this thing because I think it's a great app. So check it out.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right, Steve, I think it's your turn. And then why don't we go back to Caleb for the next one, and then I'll wrap stuff up. Since I'm
Sounds
usually
good.
in a good position. And I actually have an independent book. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's funny. Like, we had one from each of the big two, but then everything else today is indie, which is great. I love it. It makes me feel super cool because I love indie books, and I think we have a lot of. I think we have a good selection tonight. So, my book is the latest published book from Charles Burns, and we were talking about this beforehand. I didn't realize originally that this particular book, and Bill is having me stand by. Okay.
I'm just setting up for something a little later in the discussion. I just realized something was with arm's length. So.
Well, cool. So I had not realized that this had been published previously as a different work. In 3 separate volumes. So it originally came out in Europe, and I believe it's 2021 is when it started. It's a 3-volume series called Daedalus, or in France, in France it was Dédale, and in I believe in Dutch and German it was Daedalus.
And who told you that? Who told you that?
Bill had mentioned it, and so then I went and looked it up. I was like, "Oh, okay." And so then I, was able
first
to find
he
it.
said no. He said no, no.
Well, because it didn't sound right. And interestingly enough, just so you know, it is not listed in the publication information in this book too. So if you did not know that it had been previously published, it looks like brand new. So this came out in September of 2024, collected for the first time and published for the first time in the US. And that is Charles Burns' Final Cut. I had gotten this last year when it had come out. I hadn't had a chance to read it until just recently, and I'm so excited that I waited for it because it was definitely worth the wait. But this book was just absolutely stunning. And if you've read any of Charles Burns before, you know his work is just beautiful. It's methodical. Characters and details are so particular, especially landscapes. Small details are very prominent in Charles Burns' work, and he's done a lot of great stuff. But obviously one of my favorites was Black Hole, and this I think feels a little bit like Black Hole in maybe the focus of the characters that we're focusing on are relatively like young adults, post high school. Maybe sort of college age-ish, and it takes place in the 70s. So it is very much a period kind of.
That's Black Hole.
Yeah, but it doesn't like the time frame. I think the time frame is only important in sort of like some of the like accoutrement of the time period. So instead of VHS or DVDs or whatever, they're watching movies with reel-to-reel 8mm. And the movie references that they're making are movies from like the 50s and 60s, those kind of like monster movie, like Silver Age Hollywood monster movie, but more B movies that were coming out a lot in the 50s and 60s. And as well, like one of the big later references in the book is on The Last Picture Show by Bogdanovich. So this book, Final Cut, it centers around 2 separate people, and you do get their different perspectives. The book trades off, looking at things from the eyes of Brian, who is a young man who is an obsessive artist. He loves movies. He loves making art, but his art is, of course, very strange and very cerebral. And as we go through the story, we find out a lot more about his personality. His mother's an alcoholic, and he's been trying to, keep things together around the house. It's just him and his mother, and he takes care of her. But he also has a lot of emotional and psychological issues. And it becomes kind of clear that he is bipolar, or what they would have called at that point, in the 70s, manic depressive. He goes through these periods where he obsesses so fully and completely about something, and he can't stop talking about it. He can't stop thinking about it, and then he goes, quickly switches to very, stoic, withdrawn, periods of just frozen depression, essentially. And the object of his obsession here, essentially, is Lori, who is this beautiful redhead who his best friend Jimmy found to be an actress in one of their new sort of film projects that they do. They make films. They made films for each other as kids, but now they're adults. They're making movies for themselves, movies for their friends. And this story kind of is the creation of one of those films over the course of several months, and the growing relationships that develop between Brian and Lori, as well as Lori and one of the other characters in the group of friends. And this is very much like, I've heard it described as a romance novel, and it is. It's a type of romance that is essentially one-sided. Brian is obsessed with her. He clearly loves her, but in a way that he can't really articulate, but also he can't really meet her, where she is. And from her perspective, there's a discomfort, not just with Brian. She really cares for Brian. She understands his quirks, and she's very concerned about him, throughout the story as it progresses. But her emotional development lies elsewhere and with somebody else in the friend group. And I will say that this is a surprise queer book that I was not expecting, and I very much enjoyed that. Yes, I think the perspective is kind of simplistic, I guess. It is written by a straight man, but I think there is that heart.
You also have to say, through at least artistically, throughout his artistic career, he has very queer sensibilities.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like a lot of it is a lot of his work is queer coded. There's just a lot there, but in this particularly because he's focusing on the women, or the one woman in this one. So and her internal monologue is very prominently featured, and I think he does a pretty good job in sort of understanding that voice or trying to impart that voice so that it's believable. But going to the art, I mean, it's Charles Burns. The art is gorgeous. It's weird. There's images and creatures that are coming from the mind of Brian that pop up in a way that blur what is reality and what is sort of in Brian's head. This sort of fantastical daydream world that he inhabits. And there's a lot of just the design of these sort of like space creatures that look almost like a human brain with tentacles, with cocoons. There are a lot of references here to films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and like I had mentioned, The Last Picture Show, but also classics like Rodan, Monsters Attack, Blood Feast, things like that. And they're beautifully rendered. Everything here is just it's so gorgeous. He does his colors, and of course, lots of shading, lots of, thick line work in a very Charles Busch way. But he plays with the panels. He plays with time. Sometimes you don't know from one segment to the next how much time has passed. And then also he kind of plays with the layout on the page. You see sort of like, larger panels. You see a full screen spread, a full, double page spread with a landscape. And then you have something like this, which is essentially like a storyboard, which Brian talks very frequently about how he plans for everything in these storyboards for the film that they're making, but also kind of in his life in a way. It's the one thing that he can control. But one of the little joys that I found in this book, and I'll wrap this one up pretty quick, but is his rendering of old black and white films. There are moments where he takes panels from these films and just lovingly recreates them in a way that is, it's definitely of his very animated style, but you can just see it lifted directly off of the celluloid. And it's gorgeous. The black and white shading, everything just fits his style so well. And it gets incorporated so beautifully in this book. So absolutely, Final Cut. Pick it up. I know it's kind of pricey in the hardcover, but I think they are going to be doing a soft cover at some point. It is absolutely worth it to pick it up and pay $34. It is put out by Pantheon in the US. You can still get the individual volumes if you want to. I believe they're published under multiple names, but it's Daedalus or Daedal or Daedalus from Cornelius Press, which is a French publishing company in Europe. So you can still get these if you'd like to read them in French, Dutch, or German. They're available for you. So absolutely recommend this one, Final Cut. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. I have a question. Does Charles Burns do his grammar tonight? Jesus. Does Charles Burns do his own colors?
I believe he does, or at least he did in this case.
Okay.
He doesn't always do work in color though, so I think in this
that's
case,
the thing, because he is an artist who's definitely had an evolution, because most of his early work is very monochromatic, and even though there are some post Black Hole works that color is an element, it was just kind of striking to see certain palette choices with his work in that. That was a little surprising. Just a warning for people about Black Hole. It's a beautifully executed work, but man, it's, hide the razor blades. I mean, it is a rough read.
Yeah.
And especially, for anybody who's lost people to AIDS in their life, it isn't a huge puddle jump from the bug of the 1970s in Seattle to what we were contending with in the 80s and 90s. Just a bit of warning there. I don't even want to say warning, but just know the kind of terrain, because it's definitely worth the reward. It definitely is, but it is a very rough read. And this doesn't look as traumatic.
it isn't. It's very cerebral. It's very personal. There's Brian's story and Laurie's story are told very closed, based on their own experiences, and I think it's great that he shows us their relationship from each perspective, because if we only saw it from Brian's perspective, if we only saw it from Laurie's perspective, we definitely would not understand at all why things were happening the way they were. Just as an FYI, there's a lot of nudity in this one, so but it is equal opportunity. So you get some woohoo and you get some DD. It is definitely if you're looking for that, it is not smutty. And you know how much I love smutty comics, but it is, again, it's just so beautifully presented. I really, really love this book.
And just in terms of my reaching for something at the beginning of this, I realized that there was some Charles Byrne work. You'll see CDs. He first made his name for himself, even more than being a colleague of Raw of Spiegelman, through his album covers. He was a very early Sub Pop artist. Sub Pop 200 is his cover. Iggy Pop's Brick by Brick album, he did the cover for that. And I just reached to get this because we have been talking a little bit in some of our threads about 76 to 79 punk, which is like my favorite stuff. This is a compilation, Anarchy in the UK DIY, from Rhino Records from 93, and it really is one of the best introductions you could get from a single disc of the punk movement. Everybody's represented apart from the Clash, and look who designed the CD there. That's Charles Burns.
Who could it be?
So it was just within reach, and I felt, let me supplement the discussion.
Awesome.
But that sounds good, and I think that is something I would pick up in softcover.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
I need to grab it in hardcover. I want it. It's I love that art style. I mean, for me, I look at Charles Burns, and it reminds me a lot of Howard Cruz, his work in Stuck Rubber Baby. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but I mean, I can't say it reminds me of Howard Cruz because Howard Cruz does a lot more cartoony stuff in most of his work. But in Stuck Rubber Baby, Howard Cruz kind of distilled it down to kind of what you're seeing here, and you know, this Burns reminds me of that a lot. I really appreciate it, especially his shading. Just the way he plays with his lines and the texture. Like when you see Charles Burns' hair, you know it's Charles Burns. It's almost like George Perez hair. Like it. It's like George Perez drew that hair. You know,
oh, absolutely. It's the shadows and the waves. Like you just know it. I do have to say, like, with
comment I heard about hair was about Alan Davis. You can tell it's Alan Davis' hair because none of the women have left a beauty parlor from 1986.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing for somebody who hasn't really sampled much of his work in, I'd say, like 15 years, there definitely is an evolution of the style. I mean,
absolutely. It's
absolutely him, but he is kind of firing on different cylinders with this. And
he's evolved,
right?
I said it before. It's an evolution. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Caleb, you got another indie book?
Well, I don't. Not really. It's not an indie book as much as it's a manga.
Oh,
this is actually something that is. Okay. It's if you happen to jump on your Viz app right now, you will find the new hotness as far as manga goes. And this is where I say it's not an indie book. It is it's a very, very popular book. You will find the latest release from a very kind of popular manga artist that you may be more familiar with his work on Dr. Stone, but it's a manga artist, a mangaka named Boichi. And again, doing, same artist that drew Dr. Stone, which is a very, very big hit in manga. But this one's called The Marshal King. And there are about 6 issues out right now. Again, I'm reading on the Viz app, so enjoy my very dirty screen that I need to clean from my iPad. But I found this earlier, and I started reading it. I loved the thumbnail of it and took it and ran with it. But it's a lot of fun. And again, there's 6 issues out on the Viz app right now, and this is getting a lot of conversation. There's a lot of people talking about this. So the story, in a nutshell, follows this character. It is a little bit of a Western. It's a little bit of sci-fi adventure. Kind of almost like a Mexican desperado, which they talk about the age of desperados all through that. So it's meant to evoke that. But the main character of the series is this kind of kid named Jimmu Godspeed. And he is the son of a very legendary outlaw in this world, right? And his dad, his name was just M, the letter M, Godspeed. And the dude had literal golden arms. He was a psychopath. He scared everybody. But when I say this is kind of like a Western, and it's meant to be a Western, it's not really Sergio Leone Western, right? This is more like East of West Jonathan Hickman style Westerns. The desert, when you see the canyons, all beneath them are like tech, right? It is cables, it is wires, it is tubes. It's all meant to be like this metal underneath the desert. There are trains that move stuff from coast to coast, and these trains are literal roving banks, right? And they're basically aircraft carriers, right? They've got all the armament, nukes, and everything you want. But again, this is a sci-fi Western, right? It's the age of desperados. The story starts off with the main character's dad, right? This M. Godspeed, who is about to rob a train. By the way, Annie got to enjoy me reading this. My dog, for those of you who can't see this, there's a picture up right now of Annie really wanting a treat while I read comics. But they're in this desert, and M. Godspeed's about to rob this train. And there's this kind of pauper with him. It's like, hey, what are you doing? What are you going on? And, we can split the loot and everything. He's like, oh, I'm not really worried about anything right now because my son is on the way to do things, and we're going to collect it. And he's like, oh, well, that sounds like a family affair. And does your son have money? He's bringing like $15 million with him. What's up? And he's like, well, again, I don't care about my son's money because he's coming to kill me. I'm not going to live to see it. And the whole story is built around the fact that this outlaw is killed by his son. And Jimmu is interesting figure. He's kind of walking in his dad's footsteps, but he wants to be the exact opposite. So instead of being an outlaw, Jimmu wants to be a marshal. He wants to be a lawman and come out here and help. But in this world, marshals and lawmen are very elitist, right? They're a very class based thing. Only the rich kids get to go to marshal school and get to be these kind of badland cops. And he's definitely not that, except for the fact that he has money, and he is the son of a legendary outlaw. And his dad has this huge bounty on his head. And so in the very first episode, very first issue, whatever you want to call it, Jimmu kills his dad, like takes out this legendary, like almost immortal outlaw, and then rolls up into town pulling his coffin, much to the amazement and sort of chagrin of the townspeople. And he tells them, I'm going to join the marshals. I'm going to be this. And they're like, well, you're not wealthy enough. And he's like, I just killed the world's greatest outlaw, and I have all kinds of money because I'm collecting the bounty on his hand. And there's a program that if you earn it, you can be there. So it's a very, it's kind of a story about meritocracy in a sense, although I think that's a loaded term in today's modern era, because what is generally talked about as meritocracy is really just let's move all the other people that challenge for merit out of the way so that people who are just basic or have no merit look more meritorious. But interesting story for the times, and I'll digress on my own personal kind of view about the world today. But the story is a very fun. It is what you want of a modern manga. It is action packed. The art is amazing. Again, you've probably seen Boichi's art on Dr. Stone. It is kinetic. He shows all the textures of metal. Most of it's black and white, but unlike most manga, this is not all in black and white. There are pops of color interdispersed throughout the manga that really help set the tone, because it's a very action-packed book, right? But what you want out of a Western are those quiet, I mentioned Sergio Leone earlier, but you want those quiet moments where you can hear the music in the background. And he uses these pops of color to kind of slow down and kind of work in that setting. So he reminds you where you're at and then what you're supposed to be feeling or evoking out of this. And so I'm about 3 issues into it, but the first issue really just sets up the narrative. Yeah, this is your main character, Jimmu, pulling his dad's coffin, a little cross with a chain, as he goes and enters into the Badlands and just kind of earns himself a name. I can't wait to see where this goes. It is a little bit of an anti-hero story, very fun manga. I am all in. This is, and I love that this image shows you that kind of interdispersion of these muted matte colors, but it's still in color, right? Just because it's that tone of beige or something, it really breaks up the black and white monotony of what can be a, just modern manga, right? That doesn't have a lot of colors. So again, I highly encourage you to check out this on the Viz app. I think it will treat you very well. At least it did for me. I am very curious to see where they go with this, because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Actually, it sounds really cool. I haven't really been getting into much manga over the past 10 years or so, but looking at something like this, you kind of were talking about, most manga is black and white, but for something like this to make a decision to put, an interesting use of muted color, like it's kind of sepia, but you can tell there's sort of light effects on it.
Yeah,
this isn't cheap. This isn't a cheap kind of printing on this. A lot of manga is put out in a way where it's cheap. It's accessible,
right?
When it's originally published in Japan, like it's really easy to put out a 300-page book of comics every week, because it's all black and white. But to do something like this, this is a, it's kind of it's a cool extra touch. It allows the artist to play with things a little bit more. And I don't really know too much about Boichi, but it sounds like his publisher Japan, and obviously Viz, have a lot of faith in him to be able to pull this off, which is really great. And I'm kind of excited to see more of this.
Yeah, so I mean,
creative
he
choice.
really struck a chord with Dr. Stone. That I mean, that won a lot of awards. I mean, it's a very well known manga. It's it's very popular. So I think that kind of he was able to ride his own ticket for that too.
Mhm.
They have a lot of faith in him, and you're right. Like most manga, it's meant to be it's meant to be cheap, right? They're publishing it weekly. They want it coming out all the time. It doesn't have color, and manga in a lot of ways is done kind of factory like. That they have your main artist who will draw the main figures, but they have all of these other folks who work in the backgrounds and stuff, and they just give it to them, and they have 100 people working on things and filling the background. This is all Boichi, right? This is done differently. This is all this one artist doing all the backgrounds, doing all the work, really fleshing out and writing and drawing the story too. So. And like I said, if you are a fan of East of West, right, like not plot wise, but at least tonally, this is very much in line with East of West and what that was. This kind of again sci-fi techno western, and so I like it's just I want to know more about this world. I want to know more about who these people are and where they're going, and just what's going to happen when this naked dude rolls up pulling his dad's coffin and announces that he's going to be a marshal in this world where marshals are elitists, and is really breaking all kinds of modes. I'm in this for the long haul.
Well, you mentioned techno western, and the book that I'm going to talk about, which Steve has also read, I think it's fair to characterize this as techno noir.
Okay.
Little backstory and a little bit of a poll. Are you guys at all superstitious?
Depends on what you mean by superstitious.
Okay. One superstition I've always had was that you spend found money. That's a superstition I've always had. And when I went to my local comic store, because I neglected to order this book through DCBS, I found some money in the parking lot. So I decided, because I couldn't decide which of the two covers of the many variant covers of this book that I wanted, I decided to get them both. The book I'm talking about, and this is my very first distillery book. Steve has talked about
Yep.
distillery till the cows come home. This is my first book, and I'm glad this was because it was a really good experience. And it's Warm Fusion #1 by Scott Hoffman and Alberto Ponticell. He's from Italy, so it's probably Ponticell. Like I said, we have this graphic up of the main cover, but I also took a look at the Ariel Olivetti cover, and I was like this, and I thought, like, hey, I had found money. You can spend it. So that's what I did. So very
And this is
rare double. And you got with Mr. Barnaby.
the
Oh,
copy that I have.
that
Oh
is
yeah,
a wonderful cover too. That wasn't in stock.
yeah.
Uh, but
Purple on the back.
so let's talk about this because I thought this was a really, really powerful and interesting story. So, the world of Warm Fusion is about 50 years in the future. And there are so many different elements that play together in this. So I hope I can do this justice. In the world of Warm Fusion, it's centered in New York, as I said before, in about 50 years in the future. And this New York has been through the ringer. It's been ripped apart by a series of terrorist attacks and by crime and by trauma. And I think they mentioned that there was a biological attack at some point. So the New York that we see is a very, very rough place. This is counterbalanced, however, though, with a corporate atmosphere that is still in play in the New York and New Jersey area, but it's sterile. It's sterile as can be. And it's not uncommon for people to have been through some mutations. And there is an element of body horror that runs through the story. So here we are in New York, 50 years in the future, and there's been a series of murders. And there's a detective, Detective Hanover, who appears to be one of the few good cops left from the way people talk about things. And he's trying to solve this murder. And some of these are ghastly. One murder they provide is so brutal that they can't even determine the gender of the person that was killed. And a number of these people, at least two that are mentioned within the story, are street workers. And there's a street worker named Vin Young, and she works as an escort at this brothel, and she normally dresses up as Snow White. And first her friend is killed, and then another person within that circle is killed. Also, with Vin, she is missing an arm and a leg. She has prosthetics. And in many ways, that's a very valuable kink in the world that she inhabits. And at the same time, before these characters meet, we also are introduced by a billionaire techno guy, Fleischer, who is developing this new, it's a cellular metal, I think it's described, and it's called Warm Fusion, hence the title. And it's a pioneering technology that is meant to replace prosthetics and limbs with actual limbs. And there seems to be a connection that Hanover unearths between the murders and this new cellular metal. So we are on a trajectory where these three stories are going to collide, but we don't necessarily get that fully within the first issue. And one thing I really appreciated about this, and Steve, please chime in if you agree with me, there was a lot of stuff at work here. I mean, this story was science fiction, it was noir, it was cyberpunk, it was crime, there were so many things that were at play in this story, but it was like a stew where everything was perfectly mixed. And I know we've talked about some writers in the past that have come out from outside of comics or worked in a different area of comics and it came in as a writer that were just naturals. The two that immediately come to mind were Cliff Chang with Catwoman, Lonely City, transitioning from artist to an artist writer, and may even be a better writer than he is an artist. And Nicole Maines, very recently, from acting into writing a number of series for DC currently with Secret Six. Scott Hoffman, who is best known as Baby Daddy from Scissor Sisters, I think is in that category from what I'm seeing here. It's a 48-page book with maybe 44 pages of story. It took me a lot longer to get through than your average 48-page story because there were things, the thriller element to this was so dense. And one thing that's very hard to pull off is when the future feels like the past. And between his script and Alberto Ponticelli's art, it just did it beautifully. I'm so glad that this was my first DSTLRY book because it was a very, very potent experience. The second issue is on order. I know that you have it already, so please don't spoil because I know that a lot of stuff goes down in that. Just let me know if you agree with me at all because I really thought this was a stunning, stunning first issue.
So when you're talking about sort of like the genres that it touches, you can see kind of an inspiration if you're a fan of Blade Runner.
Mhm.
There is a sort of a feel of that, like not. Interestingly enough, it's the play of sort of like future technology and future progress, but like the
But
dregs
only for
of
the
and
elites. Yeah.
but only for the elites, and
elites.
everything
Yeah.
else is sort of like the decay of capitalism and the downtrodden. So you have something really cool. Everybody has these sort of like solid light umbrellas that just pop up, and they keep you dry because in this New York it rains all the time thanks to ecological disasters that were caused in the past. But at the same time, people are still struggling to get by. Some of the main characters obviously are sex workers who put their lives on the line to just be able to survive. They've been either abandoned or have nowhere else to go, and this is their way of making money to survive in this in this society, which is pretty crazy. And some of the fantasies, the sexual fantasies that they're helping their clients fulfill are pretty violent and kind of twisted.
Mhm.
And it's
Which ties into why Hanover is looking so closely at the brothels.
absolutely. And it is an interesting play between those two because he's a pretty main character, and of course the Vin is pretty important as well. You see things from both of their perspectives.
Steve, can
And
you just go
it's
back
good.
with some of the graphics? Because there was just one thing I wanted to comment. This is
Mhm.
Mishmash. This is towards the end. And this is the creature that Mr.
Yeah.
Barnaby is cultivating. And that was the last few pages are some rough shit. And in my head, there's a perfect voice for a mishmash. What you have here with Tuesday Manhattan and then the last image that you had before, that's basically like a 2-page preamble. And I think at most this is 160 words, but it feels like through like a 10-minute introduction to a movie before credits rolled. I just thought it was fascinating how things were laid out. And in terms of the art, I was familiar with Ponticelli's work with the Unknown Soldier from Vertigo many years ago, and then later Frankenstein Agent of Shade. But nothing prepared me for this level of nuance and novelty. I mean, it really is very stunning artistic work. And Lee Lawfridge's, I doubt I pronounced that person's name right. He knows when not to color. That's a very smart choice in and of itself, too.
Well,
so.
especially in a book like you. I didn't get it from the first couple images you showed, but the one that you've got up on the screen right now, where they're looking at a crime scene in the rain. You mentioned noir earlier, and this really drives that home. So when you've got a noir book, yeah, you have to have a colorist who knows when not to, when to draw back and when simplicity is actually going to do the best work. One of my, I haven't read this. It's now very much on my list. I'm going to try to order it. But one of my favorite things about this is in the background, all the different graffiti. And that's one of my favorite things in comics is when they show an urban setting and there's all these different messages in the background on the, on walls and stuff that kind of add to the ephemera of the world that you're living in. And I think that they did a great job with that because the messages really do set the tone for the story as well. So they kind of didn't transmit a little bit too, and I thought that was that's one of the best elements of that.
I do wish our still occasional co-host Brian Pittard was with us because I think he would love this book.
Yeah.
Because it's enough of a queer sensibility, his love of Blade Runner. I don't think the body horror stuff really appeals to him, but I think he would just really be plugged into this storyline.
The characters I think that Scott Hoffman, is presenting here, especially with the sex workers, there's a very close knit, but they all have very clearly expressed personalities. They're not caricatures. These are,
and they're not on the same wavelength, and that's nice to see as well.
No, yeah, they're all very different, and but making it work in this, this really depressing future. And in the second issue, there's a lot more that you get to see.
And just the alignment, and the alignment between law enforcement, since it is like effectively 3 main characters, at least that was my takeaway, that they do come from such different perspectives from the street and from law enforcement and from opulence. It just sets off a really nice dynamic.
It's almost, I mean, there's kind of very similar elements to Sin City. With what you just
there's
said.
that also kind of.
And that's another thing is like I feel like I've seen this world before, and I never saw this world before those first 2 pages. That's a feat in and of itself when you're world building.
Yeah,
it was really good.
It's familiar, but it's unique enough that you're like, yes, okay, what else can we have? It's funny that I read this and then was reminded. I think I was talking to you about yesterday of Max Headroom. Just popped in my head and came up as something, on my
Max
platform.
Headroom never would have popped into my head from this.
But the type of grittiness that's being shown here, this sort of like, there's technological advancements, yes, but it looks like it's worn out and run down already.
Yeah, it's advancements, but it's bleak.
Right.
And it's crumbling.
I do
everything that's been built up is still crumbling.
I get that.
So
all right, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like this. I can't wait for issue number 3 now.
Which I think is in April, so not too long to wait. All right, well, we are kind of up against the clock, so I think we have to start wrapping this show up. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears up, we have 2 segments. The first, on our way to the end, is where we show off our Geek Gets. Geeky genre sort of things that we picked up in the time since we've last been together. Steve, do you have a Geek Get?
I've got a couple little things. So one of them, of course, this is actually over this way. This is actually an older poster for Doctor Strange Fall Sunrise from a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
gorgeous. And I think, Caleb, you talked about this when
Yeah.
it came out.
Yep.
And I found the poster, and it is just absolutely gorgeous. I just had to put it up.
It's
But
Tradmore. The
also,
story makes no sense, but Tradmore can draw whatever he wants.
oh yeah, exactly. Like, just make it pretty. Like, I'm good with
Yeah.
that. And then also, the last time I was at my LCS, there were a couple Image Ashcan / preview mini comics
I have
that were
those.
available.
I have those.
Yeah, so they had
Yeah.
You'll Do Bad Things with
That-
We're Taking Everyone Down With Us on the flip side. So it's just a short little, few page with an interview for each author. And then Bitterroot, The Next Movement, just a black and white Ashcan style preview for the upcoming sequel to the Bitterroot series. So I thought that was kind of cool. What do you guys have?
Caleb?
I'm gonna throw an audible. What I thought was gonna be my geek get, I'm gonna save for my wolf of the week. But I do have a geek get, and that is we said on the show before that very jokingly I am the love child of Rob Halford and Dolly Parton. So a little bit metal, a little bit country. And one of my favorite country, if I don't even know that you can call him country. I don't think he's country. I think he's more Americana. But Jason Isbell, and he has his new album Foxes in the Snow, which came out last week, and I absolutely adore it. I love Jason Isbell. I love all his work. Little behind the scenes baseball. This is his divorce album. Him and his former spouse have gotten divorced, and it was not amicable. It was very hard. I'm also a very big fan of his spouse's music, so it was kind of hard to watch that power couple break up. But this is that. And it's got some of the same themes that Isbell talks about in his previous albums. It's not as good as Weather Vanes as the album in its entirety, but there's a song on here that really resonates. It's called Crimson and Clay, and it's basically about growing up in a small town but having to escape the small town, and because that's just not for you, and still retaining those small town sensibilities, but the things that we were always taught, like loving your neighbor and caring for people and things like that are no longer reflected in kind of conservative circles where they are nice to you to your face, but they did give two fucks if anybody that they don't know dies or is destitute or is punished or poisoned or is suffering. He talks about that and what that means to go home, and I really relate to that. And so it's a fantastic album. I encourage you to listen to it and check it out, buy it, do what you want to with it. It's good stuff. Go listen to his entire catalog. It's a lot of fun.
Very cool. I have it queued up. He's an artist that I want silence.
Yeah.
And I had also intended to have a music oriented geek get from an act that I really love that have a new album out, Manic Street Preachers.
Yep.
But I'm just hesitant to do it till I have a physical copy.
Right.
So I'm glad you got the vinyl. It's a very nice package too.
It's wonderful.
Yep. So instead of music for me, I'm going with toys for my geek get. While I was away, I did attend ZoloCon, which is a mostly toy-based convention out in Bucks County. They're big enough to have a nice little program there. And one thing that ZoloCon is known for is being one of the Mego hubs. Some of the bigger Mego carriers, like Absolutely Retro, appear there. So I did pick up something old and something new. In terms of the new stuff in Mego, I got 2 Ultraman figures. I already had Ultra 7, but I have the original Ultraman, and then a little later in time in the 80s, Ultraman Jack. There is an Ultraman Tiga figure as well. At some point I might get that, but maybe I should first watch Tiga. And then in terms of accoutrements to Mego, I got a carrying case. Oh boy, I got a carrying case. Let me tell you about this carrying case. The first Christmas that I had Migos was in 1973. The only things that were available were the initial 8 figures and this carrying case. And it's very common to see like the cracking and bubbling of the uh, of the plastic over the graphic, but I haven't had one of these in my hands in over 50 years. So I'm just happy I got this.
I
Nice to
love that.
have it. Yeah. So that's my geek gets.
Also, who nobody better shit on carrying cases. Carrying cases are cool. Like the
Carrying
best.
cases are. I will always maintain this. More Star Wars figures were saved because if you had that damn
The Darth
the
Vader. That's
Vader head
I was going to
or
talk
the
about that, right?
C-3PO head, that saved more
Mhm.
figures than anything else.
The Darth Vader head carrying case is probably my favorite carrying case in history.
Yeah.
Like that is just so cool. The Micro Machines had some cool ones too because you had the Micro Machines carrying case that turned into a world for your Micro Machine. But anyway,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. At
And
least when I was
Polly
a kid, like the Hot Wheels cases sucked.
yeah,
They were just squares and stuff, but that Darth Vader head, and then later they had the C-3PO head. I think if you were getting rid of your toys, I think just keeping that and putting that in the attic was a nice way to save a bit of your childhood. And I think a lot of people did that. So, all right, we're headed towards the end of our show. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bear Sup, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar where we woof at something which may be comic book or comic book related, or it may be a film or a television program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
Well, my woof of the week will take a couple seconds because Victor Rose is letting us know that he did have the
Me
Darth
too.
Vader carrying
Nice.
case there.
Me too.
Unfortunately, he has no idea what happened to that or
Aw.
his figures, which means that there is some place where that carrying case and all the figures were found intact and are now part of somebody's very expensive collection. Sorry, Victor. But yeah, so my woof of the week goes out, and this is kind of a controversial woof for me, and it's controversial for a couple of reasons. One, because of the actual subject itself, the film that I got to see as a surprise screening with AMC. They had a mystery movie, and I decided to just go ahead and buy a ticket. And the mystery film was Magazine Dreams, which you may recall from a couple years ago when a certain actor, Jonathan Majors, had gotten a lot of Oscar buzz because of this and had just made his debut as Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And he was poised to really, do a lot, be a major player, both in the Marvel universe as well as sort of on the Oscar Hollywood scene. And then, of course, the civil and criminal action kind of took over the news cycle for him. He got into a fight with his, at the time, girlfriend. There was a lot of violence back and forth, and unfortunately did not end well with him, and he got summarily dropped by everyone, and for good reason. I mean, this is it's understandable for sure. So I've been very conflicted in watching it. It hasn't been available for the past couple of years, but they are going to be releasing it in the next couple of weeks. So people will be able to see it now. It has been picked up for distribution. So this image is probably the best image to kind of show what this film is about. It is very hard to watch, in parts because it makes you very uncomfortable to see this, this amazingly well acted character who is severely, I would say bordering on incel, but more he's just awkward, potentially on the spectrum, severe emotional trauma damage, and he is obsessed with his body and making himself a bodybuilder to go on magazine covers, and that is his entire trajectory in life. But the rage that he flies into at times, mostly due to steroids, but also due to just unanswered and unapproached trauma from his childhood, just really makes him go from very uncomfortable situation to terrifying situation to horrifying situation. This film is probably most closely related in feeling to Requiem for a Dream for me. It's less surreal, although there are some daydream moments, but just sort of like the edge of your seat sadness that you feel for this character, and you don't know what's going to happen next, and you just know that it's not going to be good. It is a tough watch. I do recommend it. I will never watch this movie again. But if that sounds like something that you would like to see, and it is, amazing performance, and I kind of feel bad in a way, but again, it is controversial too, for some people to even go to see this movie. I would recommend it. So Jonathan Majors is in it with Haley Bennett, Taylor Page, and Mike O'Hearn. And a lot of people put a lot of heart into this film, and it's very well shot and very well acted. So it's up to you if you want to go and see it. But I do recommend it, but I understand why a lot of people may not want to see it.
Sure.
So, there you go, Magazine Dreams.
Okay, over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your wolf of the week?
So my wolf of the week is going to be a literary wolf of the week, and it's actually both something I hope everybody picks up and reads, and has a little bit of a personal bent to it because I'm friends with the author. So my good friend Jared Lemus, his debut story collection came out this past week, and it's Guatemalan Rhapsody. It's a collection of stories. I went to undergrad with Jared. He and I were both in the creative writing program at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. He went on to, I went on to law school. He went on to get his MFA at Pitt, and now he teaches at Pitt, which, if you know, in literary fiction, Pitt's a very good place to be. Like, they have a very good and very prominent literary program. A lot of great authors are working there and doing stuff. I would tell you about this story, but why should I when other people who are far more eloquent than I have done so? The story, in a nutshell, ranging from a custodian at the underfunded college to a medicine man living in a temple dedicated to San Simon, the patron saint of alcohol and cigarettes, the characters in Guatemalan Rhapsody find themselves at defining moments in their lives where sacrifices may be required of them, by them, and for them. And then one of my favorite blurbs on the back of it is, in the stunning collection, characters search for love, salvation, and survival in an ever-shifting landscape with the heart scrappiness and sense of humor that can only come from a chaplain or a Chopin. Jared Lemus maps out the glory and anguish of Guatemala. So I'm very proud of my friend for producing this. Cannot wait to finish it. I've already cracked it open. The stories that I've read so far are phenomenal, right? And this is a great time to read immigrant stories, and that's exactly what this is, that really talk about who these, what life is like in Central America, and he brings that to life in the most spectacular way. So well done from what I've read. Kudos, and go buy this.
All right, well, congrats to your friend. That's very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, for my wolf of the week, Steve, I think you have a graphic for this. Ready? I hope you do. And this was a rough watch, particularly towards the end, but I do think it's a story that needs to get out there and needs to be ingrained in our society, given how much certain aspects of our populace are dedicated / obsessed with social media. Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke. This is a documentary series that's on Hulu. Ruby Franke was a vlogger who ran the YouTube channel 8 Passengers. 8 Passengers referred to the number of people that were in the vehicles that she and her husband would drive, because they had 6 kids, and the 6 kids were almost always on camera in regards to the content that she would provide. Became a star on YouTube, eventually started losing her audience when it was very clear that some of the punishments and restrictions that she was dishing out to the children did not seem to align with what their actions actually incorporated. And over time, she became involved with I guess the best way to put it is a Christian mental health coaching operation called Connections. And she became involved with this woman, Jody Hildebrandt, and it became a very close relationship. So much so that they basically like kicked their husband Kevin out, and two of the oldest children, which left the four youngest children in their charge. And what they did to the two youngest children, I don't believe in hell. I don't believe that concept, that structure exists. But if it does, this bitch better head there, because it was incredibly difficult to process somebody doing the actions that they did to the two youngest children in the name of religious zealotry. It's so hard for me to comprehend. And but as I said, between the elements of spotting signals for future abuse and just the straight out weird position that social media has in certain circles, this is definitely a worthwhile watch. Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Frankie.
Yeah. Oh, it's there's been a lot coming out lately because of the trials that I believe both of them concluded for Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Frankie.
Mm-hmm.
They both are facing prison. I believe were found guilty of several counts of child abuse and neglect and all those things. So there are several other specials and documentaries that are out there, some focusing more on Jody herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she was less a relationship therapist. She was technically a sex therapist, or as close as one that could be. That was
but then it went to this weird Christian end time thing.
Yeah. I mean, she was part of the LDS. Like they're all part of the LDS church. Yeah. But her, like, Jody's sort of path was very different. And weird sort of like sexual chastity and punishment and all that. Yeah. And this combined with Ruby's own sort of like spiral into, child rearing and the discipline that became just full on abuse and torture. It was just very strange how these two just sort of came into each other's orbit and made everything worse.
And this is distinguished because it does have the participation of her ex-husband and the two oldest children.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's very important to make that distinction, given some of the other product that's out. So, my wolf of the week. Cheerful, huh?
Cheerful, oh, boy.
But otherwise, we've had a very good time tonight. So again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on social media as Comic Book Bears, save for Facebook, where we are Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you want to listen to our episodes, you can get us through Apple Podcasts and many of the other podcatching platforms. And if you have joined us tonight through Facebook Live or through YouTube, thank you. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
If you're listening to the audio version, you're going to hear a wolf and an explosion. We'll be back in about 2 weeks. Take care, everyone.
Wolf.